Hey everybody, it's Chris Sovey with HealthyConsumer.com, and today we're going to make homemade yogurt, particularly raw yogurt. Now, if you're already sure that you want to make raw yogurt, I'd recommend going ahead and just skipping forward, just kind of cruising through the video there and seeing where I go ahead and start preparing everything and getting everything ready. But I would like to take a few minutes to kind of discuss why raw yogurt. If you're kind of on the fence about this whole raw thing, especially with milk products, it's understandable. There's an understandable concern there. So we're going to discuss that for a few minutes before we get into this actual process of making the yogurt. Some of the questions you might have on your mind is raw yogurt safe? And what I mean by raw yogurt is a yogurt that is made from a milk that has not been pasteurized. Usually it's made from milk that's not homogenized either, two completely separate processes. But the pasteurization process involves usually a large amount of heat or a smaller amount of heat administered over a longer period of time. So virtually all milk sold within the United States now is pasteurized. And there are a number of reasons for that. It started quite a while ago with Louis Pasteur. I've discussed that on my website before. And since then we've always pasteurized our milk. Before that, for many centuries, we were consuming raw milk. The only time it might have been heated was if the milk was used in cooking for some reason or another. The process of pasteurization does essentially kill all microbes, but it needs to be understood that contamination problems and food poisoning frequently occurs in pasteurized milk as well. It's a very possible and realistic situation. That timer is actually part of this whole yogurt making process here, as we'll see. So anyways, where was I? Yes, pasteurization. So the pasteurization process is arguably changing the fundamental structure of milk, and a lot of people believe that the pasteurization process actually takes milk and turns it into a pro-inflammatory food, which may contribute to the reason that a lot of people are having troubles digesting milk, a lot of problems with the lactose. It changes the way that the enzymes interact with each other, and then also can kill off the enzyme, because many enzymes are very heat sensitive, so it changes the fundamental structure of milk. Now, I'm not denying or downplaying the seriousness of contamination or some of the bugs that could get into raw milk in itself, but cultured dairy products, such as raw yogurt or raw cheese, are more than likely a much more safe alternative. The reason being there are barriers to pathogenic bacterial or other microbial growth, one of them being the acidity of yogurt that happens naturally in the yogurt making process. And then also there is usually an amount of heat applied. So those two things together create a hostile environment against pathogenic bacteria and promotes the growth of organisms such as the lactobacillus or the bifidobacterium, which are certainly beneficial for our health. It's important to understand that yogurt has been produced for several centuries and is essential for promoting dietary digestion, and it's a great aid for that kind of thing. So anyways, I was on the fence about the whole raw milk thing, and milk in general, because for a long time I was kind of going towards strictly the whole, like, a very militant veganism thing, and as a result I was shutting myself out from a whole lot of possibilities. There are some bizarre things about milk. When we think about it at its fundamental sense, it seems kind of bizarre. We are the only species that is drinking essentially the breast milk of another species. To me, when I started looking at that, I was like, this is really bizarre. And so for a long time I kind of swore off milk, especially if you look at the process, the factory farming and all that stuff. It just gets to be such a mess, and it's so gross. There's so many factors involved there that adulterate, I think would be the right word to use there, our whole food system. And I've talked about that a lot on my website. But in its fundamental sense, in its purest sense, yogurt could be a phenomenal booster to your health. So I do warn you to make sure when you are choosing a source of milk, you know the farmer and you've done your research. That being said, I just have to say this because I don't know, what kind of people are watching this. You are still taking a risk by intaking any type of raw milk. So it's a risk versus benefits kind of thing. So I've said it there. I'm probably going to put up some kind of disclaimer because, I just don't know these days with people in lawsuits. So we're going to go ahead and get into the actual process of making yogurt. This is my second attempt, and I'll explain to you what happened the first attempt here. But we're using a starter culture. This is a thermophilic. Thermo being heat, philic being love. So this culture loves heat, but not enough heat for it to go out of the raw category. So my first attempt with making yogurt was with a mesophilic culture. So it was a culture that was was supposed to grow at room temperature, and I had some issues with that. So we're trying the thermophilic culture now, and I believe it's going to turn out great because so far we've been able to get the pure culture, the pure mother culture to grow well. So from here, all we have to do is make the cultures. So I'm going to get all the supplies ready here, and we're going to go ahead and make the raw yogurt. So here we go. Okay, so we're here in the kitchen now, and let me explain what I've got here. This is from the Cultures of Health. There are a couple other companies out there that are selling various yogurt starters. As I mentioned, this one particularly is a thermophilic culture. It consists of just organic milk and live active cultures. I believe that it is lactobacillus species and bifidobacterium. I didn't know for the longest time, I don't know if you guys knew this, but I found out that the differences in taste for yogurt is actually determined by the bacteria or the cultures that are in it. And I found that fascinating. So that makes the differences between all the yogurts that you buy in the store, which making your own yogurt at home is beneficial because you're not loading it up with all the sugars and all the other things, that thickeners, carrageenan, and those sort of things. So here's what I've got here. Let's talk about this real quick. So I have 100% raw milk here. This guy's doing grass-fed. I think he gives them a little grain at the end. Wasn't too happy about that, but what are you going to do? I'm very thankful for this. I'm in Michigan, so the only way that I can get this milk is actually through a cow share. Now, I'm a poor graduate student, so I can't afford a cow share right now. But I have a friend that I'm very grateful for that has provided me with this milk, just buying it from her cow share, so I'm very thankful for that. So we have raw milk here that's been chilling in the fridge, and we have a pure mother culture here made from this raw milk that I've made ahead of time. And all that involves is, it's kind of the first step of the multi-step process of making yogurt. It seemed really complicated at first, but once I actually learned how to do it, it wasn't too bad. So this is the pure mother culture, and what that entails is I would take about a cup of the raw milk, cup and a half, and then you heat it on the stove to a little under 160 degrees, and then you let it cool to 110 degrees, and then you add in the culture packet, and then you apply a steady heat source at 110 degrees for several hours. They say 5 to 7. It really took me like 10. So, it does that. That's another thing to consider, is there's a time commitment to this whole thing. But we'll see how the whole product turns out, and I think it'll be worth it. So, to make sense out of why you do that, this is a self-propagating culture. So I can use this over and over again indefinitely as long as I take care of it, and I make a new culture once a week. So very economical. And so this is essentially pasteurized right here. And the reason for that is if you try and put the culture in a raw milk and just use that straight out and then keep using that over and over time, it will weaken because it's trying to compete with so many other organisms in there. So this is kind of like our sterile culture, I guess. Not really sterile, but so we use that to inoculate the rest of the milk. So that's the explanation of the process. So other than what we've got here, you'll need, I have a little thermometer here. Instant read would be best because you don't want to heat it too much. And then, so this will remain raw. It'll never go above, I'm aiming it'll never go above 110 to 112 degrees. So that's what we've got here. I'm also about to pull out a sterile jar that I've been heating in the oven 25 minutes, 250 degrees. Will completely kill all organisms on a glass jar. So I'm about to pull that out of the oven here and let that cool down. And then we can go through the process of making this yogurt and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to do that and we'll be right back. Okay, so anyways, we're ready to go here. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple things. We're going to go through this step by step. But first, I just want to show you this book. This is The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz, and he is quite the connoisseur of fermentation. This is kind of like a fermentation Bible in a sense. And when you're making yogurt, it's practically fermentation of milk. So that's what we're doing with yogurt. And let me go over a couple of things real quick. When you're starting making yogurt, especially a raw yogurt, you want to make sure that everything's really clean. So as I mentioned, I sterilized the jar that it's going to be going into, and it doesn't have to necessarily be sterile, but it's not a bad idea, and it's an easy little extra step. So, you know, and I just don't want to introduce anything that's on my hands, so I'm going to put on gloves here. I've washed my hands. And then a lot of I was a little hesitant to buy these cultures at first from the Cultures of Health because a lot of people were saying that they were pretty runny and they couldn't get the thick yogurt that they were looking for. So I'll tell you, I don't know. I mean, I'm just making the culture so far, the pure mother culture, but this is anything but runny. If anything, it's almost too thick. I mean, it's real solid. I tasted it earlier. It's phenomenally good. I think it's going to be dependent on what your milk source is like, for one, and then of course when you're making this, I recommend really shaking up the culture and making sure that, you know, it gets evenly distributed, not just dumping the bacteria in there and just letting it do its thing. So help to propagate that by doing that. So okay, so first things first, we got all our supplies here, and then we're going to heat up the milk. If it wasn't clear, making the culture, the pure mother culture, all these tips, or all the directions come with the actual culture. So I'm just going to go over the actual process of making the yogurt now that we have this culture. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer those. So we're going to get started here by measuring things out, and I've got my cheat sheet over here in case I need it. So let's get started. Alright, so this is going to be going into my 1 liter jar here. When it comes to fermentation, I'm a big fan of anaerobic fermenting systems whenever possible. So I don't see the point in making something that you're going to introduce a whole bunch of other potentially dangerous or you know, just deleterious bacteria that get in the way of your culture, or just, you know, make it not a pure culture. So what I'm trying to say is, by using anaerobic systems such as a phyto jar that completely seals it off from air, you prevent aerobic organisms from getting into the whole mix. And I do that with sauerkraut. I do that with fermented carrots when I'm making fermented carrot juice for their probiotic content, which is essentially the same reason that I'm making yogurt, because it's really all about the bacteria. We're made up of a significant amount of bacteria, so you know, I'm going to do my best to supply my body with the bacteria that it needs. So we're going to measure out 2 cups here at a time, and I'm going to pour that into the... So this is like serious whole milk here. That's going to go in the pan again. 2 cups. And then we're going to do a total of 4 cups. I know I should be reading this from the side, not above. Let's see. You know, I don't think this is an exact science, because they don't even give exact measurements. They just kind of ballpark it, so that's what we're going to do. So, we've got 4 cups of milk here, and now what we're going to do is we're going to heat that up to, they say 110 degrees, but then they also say don't go over 112. I'm like, well, that's kind of, you know, that's a very small margin there. So I am actually going to heat it up to less than that, probably around 80 to 90, and then we'll let the dehydrator do the rest of the work and get it up there slowly. If it needs to continue to heat up, that way I don't overshoot it and kill all the benefits of the raw milk. So I'm going to let this go here. You know, it's actually still pretty cold, so we're going to let it go, and we'll check back in a second. Okay, so we've got the, just took a couple minutes, now stirring, and we've got the milk up to pretty much body temperature, 98 degrees. So from there, I'm going to get this out of the way here. This over here. Working in a small apartment. So anyways, what we're going to do now is we are going to transfer this into the jar that I'm going to be making the yogurt in. So that's at 98 degrees, and about a perfect amount for this. Just perfect. So now what I'm going to do, I've got my pure culture over here. Let's adjust the camera here. So I got my pure culture, and the directions are telling me 2 teaspoons per cup. So, one second, let me grab my teaspoon. Okay, so again, 1.5 to 2. So we'll get, man, this is, look at how thick that is. I mean, it's almost like a paste. You could almost thin it down, but you know, that's not a problem when it's almost too thick. So I've got 1 teaspoon here. Oh, we got more than enough of this, let me tell you. 2 teaspoons. It's thick. I am by no means an experienced yogurt maker, but I'm very interested in trying this out, so I like to experiment and explore new avenues of things related to our food and traditions that we've been doing for a long time. They're starting to become a bit of a lost art, in a sense. So, you know, I want to understand this, and I want to understand why we've changed so much. The agricultural revolution. Listen to me babbling on here. I do this all the time. Okay, so we got 4 teaspoons there. or close to it. I know it's not exact because it's so thick and it's sticking to my gloves here. So, we got our 4 teaspoons, and they want us to equally, I'm going to rinse my glove off real quick here. At this point, I suppose I don't even need my gloves anymore. So we'll shut up our culture here. Wipe that down, a little bit on the sides there. Now, this is warm, I can feel it through the jar. We're going to shut that up. Now I'm going to shake it. I really want to distribute that culture in there evenly throughout. And I think that might be part of the issue that people are having, but we'll see if I have the same issue. Got a decent amount of bacteria that I just introduced into there, so we should be making a good yogurt here. Now it looks like this is actually leaking a little bit, which they're not known to do. I guess it's just letting out so much gas, so much carbon dioxide. Okay. But Fido jars, Sur La Table is a good place to get these cheap, and you can get them in all kinds of different sizes. Completely anaerobic environment for fermenting and doing things of that nature. So I think that's pretty well shaken. Yeah, shaken. So now what we're gonna do is, this is ready to go actually. Pretty easy once you get into it. I probably took longer than I should have in doing that, but I just wanted to make sure I did it right. So we're gonna stick this in the dehydrator at 110 degrees, or just a few degrees below it. So let's do it. Alright, so what I've done here is I've just taken out all the trays. Looks like my temperature's actually dropped a little bit, but that's no problem. I'll get it back up here. And I'm just going to slide that jar back there in the back of the dehydrator. Place on the cover. And we'll let it go. And then after that, we'll check back in, see how it turned out. It's probably going to take me a good 5 to 7 hours at least, probably closer to 10 if it's anything like before. So we'll check back soon. See ya. Okay, so it's actually been a little over a day and a half now since we last were discussing the yogurt, and since then we finished the yogurt. It took about 12 hours total to culture in the dehydrator, and then after that we removed it and put it in the fridge overnight, and to allow it to halt the culturing process and to solidify a little bit more. So as some other people have mentioned on blogs and things of that nature, the raw milk yogurt does seem to be a little runny, and I've you know, it's still very much yogurty, and it almost has more of like a cottage cheese consistency here, but it definitely tastes like yogurt, and it turned out pretty well. But as we can see, there's a little bit of runniness. What I did was I did strain some of the yogurt as to get a little more of a yogurt type consistency, and mixing it up also tends to help a little bit too with maintaining the consistency. But anyways, I think it was a pretty good experiment here, and probably continue to try and do that. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to contact me or leave a comment below. And I hope that you found this helpful. Again, my name is Chris Sovey, and this has been HealthyConsumer.com video. Have a wonderful day.